Hi, I'm Emily Belden, author of Hot Mess, and you're watching Author's Voice.
Hi everyone, welcome to Author's Voice, connecting authors to the world. This is Lit with Love and I am your host, Sonali Dev, and today I am speaking with Emily Belden, the author of Hot Mess from Graydon House for $15.99. Thank you so much for being here, Emily. I've been trying to think of a way to describe the book.
Same. For the last year, yes.
I almost feel like you should do it since you've been working on it for a year. But it was, I have to start with saying absolutely fabulous writing.
Thank you.
It's really well written, and it's the story of, it's a Chicago-based foodie, not rom-com really,
Yeah.
but something
Sort
like
of,
that.
yeah.
A foodie sort of rom-com. So thank you so much for being
yes.
here. Let me get some housekeeping out of the
Sure.
way, and then we'll jump right into
Great.
you describing the book, since
Sure.
it's taken you a year
Yes.
to describe it. If you're watching us on Facebook Live, you can type in questions into the comments, and we will answer them live, or rather Emily will answer them live for you. And if you are watching this on YouTube after we've recorded, you can still buy the book at authorsvoice.net. It is $15.99 from Graydon House. Again, thank you so much for being here, and thank you, Emily, for being here. So you want to take us into, tell us a little bit about the book?
Sure. It's kind of like Sweet Bitter meets The Devil Wears Prada. So you're right when you say it's like a restaurant rom-com almost, but essentially it's the story of a girl, and she's a 20-something who's working, living, playing her normal life in Chicago, and social media of all things brings her together with this hot up-and-coming bad boy chef, and she's suddenly thrust into the cutthroat restaurant scene in Chicago. And it is quite a scene. For people who are local, they know exactly what I'm talking about, and for people who are not, it's just a fascinating thing to really understand and read through. So it's the story of her kind of being thrust into this, and with this sort of tumultuous relationship she's in with this unreliable guy, what happens with that whole thing, and when he sort of leaves her high and dry, the story of her picking up his mess and finding herself and ultimately coming out on top.
So yes, that starts to scratch the surface a
Sure.
little
Yes.
bit. And when you say mess, we're dealing with some very hard drugs.
Yep.
So we'll come back and talk about that.
Yep.
But the foodie scene is just so authentic feeling in this book. Actually, if I had to come up with one word for the whole book,
Yeah.
it would be authentic.
Good.
The experience of being with someone who's struggling with drugs and addiction.
Right.
The experience of actually being in the Chicago, not drug scene, I was going to say, but food scene.
Sure.
Is just very authentic.
Right.
So are you from that world? Where did that even come from?
So when I was in my younger 20s, I'm 32 now, so this is quite a bit ago, I dated kind of the inspiration for this character, who he was loved by everybody. He was a prodigy in the kitchen, but he ultimately had that dark side and those more sinister habits that I had no experience with. So on one side of the coin, it was this really flashy kind of woman behind the man relationship where we got to gallivant about town and eat at all the best places, and when we would come in, we would get the best seat and we would eat the best food, and the chefs at those restaurants would show off, and so that really expanded my understanding of food and service and drink and the whole shebang. But on the other side of that was, like you had just said, the restaurant / almost drug industry. Sometimes they come one and the same, because there is this dark side of the industry that a lot of people don't know about. They have, chefs and servers, and people in the industry keep very strange hours, and their days are not typical 9 to 5, and there's a lot of pressure, and a lot of people do struggle with the substance abuse, and whether it's drugs or alcohol or anything in between. That's the other side of dating him. So in this sense, I kind of sat in that driver's seat for a while and lived the good things and tried to sort of forget about the bad things, and it's a very complicated and hard place to be. So that's where that authenticity of both sides of that comes into play.
Yes, and I misspoke. I had no idea that there was any kind of connection between the drug scene and
Absolutely.
the food scene. But I mean, some of those food descriptions, this book will make you incredibly hungry for fine food.
Right.
You know, mac and cheese is not going to cut it.
No.
Unless there's, you know.
Yeah, and I think what's fun for my character in this is that she starts as a mac and cheese, microwave frozen meal, you know, packet of lunch meat kind of a girl. And then as soon as she's thrust into this situation, everything changes for her, and she's eating stuff that she doesn't even frankly know how to eat or what order to eat or what utensil to use. And so it's a cool ride for the reader because you don't have to be a foodie to follow along. You will not be lost, you know, because you're going on her journey, which is 0 to 100. You're right there with her. And then people who are foodies are going to read it and be like, oh, I know what that is, and I know where that is, and I know who that might be about, and that's fun for those people as well.
Yes, if you've been watching Food Network,
right,
like so many of us have, it feels very much like home.
Yep, exactly.
So research-wise, was that you know, I mean, this has got to have been some of the most, or this part, the food part of it, has got to have been some of the most fun research.
Right. What's cool is that when the idea for the book was kind of inspired by that relationship that I had, that was, for all things considered, it was sort of a flash in the pan relationship, pretty quick. But the idea for the book came well after that. And so when I was doing this research, I didn't really realize it was research, but that is really what, you know, there's scenes in the book that are inspired from actual events that happened years before I wrote it. One of the scenes in there is him taking her to this restaurant. The chef at that restaurant is trying to show off and just bringing course after course after course, and she's getting so full, like sickly full, and she doesn't want to eat anymore, but he's telling her it's rude. It's kind of rude not to keep eating and clean your plate, and she goes home just laying in the back of her Uber, completely sick, not thinking she's not going to eat for the next 3 days. She's so full. And that was based off of me going to this restaurant, Blackbird, which is a Michelin-starred restaurant in the West Loop where the book takes place. And I just remember thinking, when is this going to end? I'm so full. These portions are huge. They're supposed to be little bite. They're huge. I can still think back to how physically ill I felt being that full.
I feel no sympathy for you in that. I feel no sympathy.
But it's like these, you know, I didn't realize then, like, oh, this could be a book someday. That was never in my mind. It just, when this idea came about, there was just things in the past, like little flashes that would make like excellent scenes.
But once you had decided this is the book you were going to write, then it was just all there.
Yeah, so this book is just its own strange phenomena because I'm working on my second book, which I'm like 1.5 years into, and it's much more complicated, and I need to write things out and storyboard and whatnot. This book, it was like, the idea for it, essentially, I was talking to one of my friends, and I met her through this person. She was supposed to, you know, at one point open a restaurant with him, much like in this book. And I just was reminiscing about how I knew her, and I was like thinking, oh my gosh, what if he, you know, asked me for money to open up a restaurant? And because that was kind of like what happens in the book. It's kind of like what I felt like was happening, although it never actually did. And she's just said, like, looked me square in the face and said, I'll tell you exactly what would have happened. You would have spent all your money, he would have relapsed, left you, and then you would have had to come work at the restaurant and sleep there 80 hours a week just trying to make your money back.
Boom, that's the whole
That
plot.
was the idea. Yeah. It was like, that's it. I mean, it was not long after that I put pen to paper, and the first sentence, I just saw it, and everything after that just flowed. And I knew, you know, I would maybe do a chapter every time I sat down, and right before I would close down for the day, I would just make a couple notes about what I knew I needed to do next, and so on and so forth. And it was like 3 months later, it was like the manuscript was done. Which never, it's just not how it happens. It's just not.
Some books just have
Some
that.
books just, they're there, and you just start to finish, you see the whole thing. And this was like that kind of a book.
And I think it absolutely shows in the writing. And going back to that, I think the most pivotal moment in this book is when she signs that, when she hands over that check. Because, I mean, I have a 17-year-old daughter, and this book made me a little bit scared.
Good, that's what I want.
For
Imagine
her.
my mom reading it.
Yeah, I was just like, oh my gosh, you know, there's just, and I guess not just a daughter, but it's almost being afraid for your children because it is so easy to be in Ali's situation and to to get, to get sucked in
And
like
a
that.
complicated thing with writing this book was to understand how she could do it, because you kind of set the scenario like, oh, some girl dates this guy, she gives him all her money, blah blah. It's far-fetched, but one of the big tricks for me with writing this was developing his appeal and their chemistry and their relationship, so that you understand how it's feasible that someone who is, healthy and normal and has her whole life together would make this decision. And it just, you as the reader almost just kind of breeze right by it the way that she does. It's not as far-fetched as it sounds. And so that was something that I really needed to master, that kind of manipulation and the way that he wrapped her around his finger.
So that brings us to the process, to the writing process, right? I mean, the first half of this book is you have no idea if your narrator is reliable or not. You have no idea who's likable, who is not. You have, I mean, you do that so deftly. And I have to say, Benji is an amazingly well layered character, because you really like him and you really want to like him and you want him to succeed and you want him to be the hero. And even after he's disappeared from the page, you kind of want him to come back almost, and by which time you've, by that time you're clear. But in that first half of the book, the whole reliability of who is right, who is wrong is just all over the place.
That's what I wanted to do. I wanted the reader to feel like they almost didn't know which way was up. And it's subtle. It's not big twists and turns and things are not all over the place. It's just subtle mannerisms that one of them will do or say that you kind of think, oh no, he's good, they're good. And then, the next page or next chapter, you're like, I'm concerned again. It's like that. That's what I wanted.
And was that, in terms of writing, something that you had planned, that you layered in? What was, when you did the book, in terms of outlining and layering and revisions, how did that work?
I don't think that it was something that we came back and really peppered in after the fact. It really stems from that firsthand experience, like you said, the authenticity of dating someone like that, where when you're in the moment, you don't really realize these things at all. And then when you look back, with hindsight being 20/20, you're like, that was really smartly manipulative. There's subtle things like when he's asking her for the money, it's not going very well at first from his point of view. Like, she is a little resistant, and then he kind of pauses the discussion and just takes his phone and sends a text, and she's like, who are you texting? He's like, my sponsor, I need to go to a meeting. And then, so in the moment, you're like, is he kind of a jerk? Or wait, is he focused only on the money, or is he actually putting his sobriety first? And could she relax because he is gonna go to a meeting and he is gonna see his, it's little things like just texting the sponsor that makes the reader wonder what, like I said, like what way is up here?
What is, right, and it's almost like you're suspicious of everybody. Right? It's like reading a mystery, and I always say that, to me, mysteries have like the murder on the first page, and then for the next 300 pages, you're just suspicious of everybody.
No, everybody the whole time.
And that kind of gives it this page turner quality, because you're just like, oh my gosh, I got this. Oh no, but it's not what I thought.
I think for me, what I wanted to layer specifically was tension and emotion. I want readers, my mom comes to mind, just being tense. I want you to be a little uncomfortable. I want you, screaming at the page or texting your friend that's also reading it. And, I want that. And then I want you to be able to relax a little bit and feel compassion toward a character, or feel sorry, or feel happy with them when they're happy. So it's like you go through this journey of just being tense and being okay, and being tense and being okay. And I think that's what makes it, the page turner quality.
Right, and you're always questioning, what would I do in that situation?
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's not an easy answer ever in the book, because you want people to be compassionate, and you want to give, you want somebody who's in pain to be given a chance and find that kind of succor somewhere, right? Not succor, but SUCCOR.
Yes.
Somewhere, and so you're perpetually confused about whom you're rooting for, almost, which is just absolutely really well done. So let's talk a little bit about the addiction and the research for that, because again, that's what it does to a person is really comes through.
Yeah.
It's a huge strength of the book. So
yeah, I mean, the addiction quality, the addiction themes that are in here, knowing that I was going to have the platform I had when it was published, it was not something I could just guess. I couldn't just guess that that's what it's like to date someone like this or whatnot. And I don't know if it's thankfully or not thankfully, but it is something that I went through personally. You know, I did go to a meeting or two that was open. I did take myself to Al-Anon. I did, you know, connect with the sponsor's wife. And the sponsors are characters throughout the book, supporting characters throughout the book. And there's conversations that we had, and maybe not to the degree of which, but certainly little things here and there that absolutely happened. And I think for me, it's just taking what I know and what I experienced firsthand and building the narrative around that. One thing about doing a book like this is, with the restaurant industry in particular, I was concerned about getting backlash about restaurant type things. Like, that's not how much a restaurant costs to open, or that would never happen in a restaurant. And the only feedback that I've gotten from those sort of foodie or restaurant people has nothing to do with those things. And it's actually about the addiction thing. And it's just that you have completely nailed it. So whether it's someone who struggled themselves or someone who dated someone, you know, they've just like, I've never felt understood until I read this. Or I recently just met with someone who read it who said that they were the Benji and their now wife was the Allie, and he never understood what he did to her all those years ago. And reading this was something that just, he wrote a letter to her to apologize, and it just really was something like a catalyst for them to move their relationship forward. And that part of the book, and it's not completely throughout. This is not like this destructive, you know, hard drugs all over the place book. It's just enough that addiction quality is enough to mess with the readers and kind of show a lens on something that isn't always in mainstream romance or women's fiction. So
right, and it is. It's also unique in that any one of us can find ourselves in this situation, but she knows going in. This is not, you know, this is not somebody she falls in love with and then finds out something about. She goes in knowing this, and then is able to block all of it out, which to me was such a metaphor for how we get ourselves into these situations. Because the white knight, you know, we all want to be white knights, and you think, I'm the one who's going to fix this. And that journey for her is also really interesting, to go from and all over the place. She is kind of shaky. She wants to be the white knight, yet she just wants to also block it out. And
I think for her, she's so confident in her ability to adult. She's 24, 25 in the book. She pays her bills. She has a rent. She has a job. And I think she feels like she's so okay that she could just kind of help him become okay. You know, I mean, not do everything for him, although it starts to feel like that. But that's never her intention, I think, in the beginning. I think in the beginning, she's like, I could just sort of show him the way and he'll figure it out, you know, because he's smart, he's capable.
And there are ways in which he is hyper capable. Like he's able to do things. Anyone who's really good at what they do, there's this feeling of capability that goes with them, right? So he never feels like a screw up. Because in the end, you almost want him not to be. Well, in the end of their relationship. So he almost is not a screw up.
No, not at all.
But he is under it all, which we kind of, you know, then have to piece together later.
There's also like a fun quality in the book, and I don't even necessarily know the answer, where do you ever think that he actually really wants a real relationship with her? Does he really want to be cured of those demons? Or does he kind of just see her for what she is, which is someone who is a little bit, has the blinders on, like you said, sort of blocks stuff out, is very capable, will eventually do whatever he needs, you know? Does he ever actually give her like a bona fide chance to be his girlfriend? Or does he realize that this is just the perfect person to, you know, to accomplish whatever I need, whether it's paying a bill here and there, picking up a coffee for him, opening the restaurant, you know what I mean, paying for the restaurant, that kind of thing. I don't even necessarily know the answer to it. And that's just a classic way of showing how that sort of manipulation and chemistry play into someone who could just find themselves into that situation.
And the level of ambiguity is really very real in terms of real life, right? Because one of the things that I think, I can't remember who says to her about how he did love you, but he loves cocaine more
Right.
than anything
Right.
else. And he is entirely ruled by this one thing. So all of this other stuff isn't even given a thought, right?
Right.
Because he's only after his next,
Right.
hit.
Right.
And you kind of piece all of that together, because it really, all of the things you're saying are immaterial. I mean, he's got to love the whole food thing,
Right.
Even maybe, I mean, so she almost is like, comes third. in
Right.
that.
Right.
So, and that kind of, for me, I was questioning, this is why the money that she coughs up,
Yeah.
the fact that it goes toward the restaurant,
Right.
because all the while I'm thinking that he needs that money for his addiction, and
Sure.
that's kind of what it's for.
Right.
So that was another thing where you're kind of trying to figure that out in terms of the story, right? Because because he cheats her and betrays her in such an awful way.
Yeah.
But it has nothing to do with his addiction, and yet it has all of. So it's
Again, you never know.
really well done. Yeah.
Right. You never know what way is up with this. So.
Yes,
Yeah.
and another thing that I loved was her relationship with her mom. It's just adorable, and I'm always drawn to relationships between women and families and how you turn out.
Right.
And so you want to talk a little bit about where that
yeah. I
came
mean, a
from?
lot of people ask, like, oh, is that kind of like your parents? And really, they're not. They're not super spot on in that regard. There's certain scenes, I think, that, I can sort of pick out a thing my mom might have said or did, but it's really based off of how I think a parent would respond in a situation like this. One of the biggest relationships for me to nail in this book was between her and the manager of the restaurant, which is this woman named Angela, and she's based off of a real friend of mine that I met during this whole time. But the book, I think, brings out strong female relationships, and it's something I didn't intend to write it that way, but this book was written probably about 3 years ago when its first draft, and then it came out, and then when advanced reviews went out, people were saying, oh, this is such a great book that showcases strong female relationships and friendships and mentorships and support, because Ellie and Angela couldn't be more different, but in the end, they're the ultimate teammates. And so I was like, that's interesting. I thought the book was really just about destructive relationships with guys. And I think it's just a reflection of the way that the world is now and where we're at 3 years from when I wrote it. And the world is craving a book that celebrates these strong relationships. And I was like, wow, that was like eye-opening to me, because that wasn't a focus when I wrote it, I guess.
And Angela that's interesting to say, because you and I met because we were on a panel about feminism and love stories.
Right.
So that's, and I think you had said something like that on the panel. But Angela also, to me, is another character, that whole, again, who's reliable and
who do you trust,
and she absolutely is not someone you like.
Not in the beginning, yeah.
And you completely, like, her motives are
questionable.
Completely questionable.
Absolutely.
And then she kind of really
she
comes
ends up
around.
being like the mama bear to her, and like just
Yeah.
kind of her lookout, and they really are like two peas in a pod. And that's a lot of how the relationship is with my friend that character is based on, and we're still close to that day, and she's still very tell it like it is, and I'm a little more contemplative, and she's a little more direct, and it's such a fun dynamic to have.
Right, and it almost feels at the beginning of the book that she's the one who's going to screw Ali
Screw her
over,
yeah.
but it turns out not. We do have a couple questions.
Sure.
From the audience, so thank you so much, and there's still time, there's 5 minutes if anyone else wants to ask a question. All right, so this is from, first I think Kathleen T. Ford says hello. Hi. So, hi Kathleen, and this is from Joey in Logan Square. Thank you, Joey, and hi. And he asks, or she asks, did knowing real life people that was similar to the people in your book ever get in the way of fleshing out your characters?
Not really. In fact, I think it really helped, because there's so many things in here that if you don't have that firsthand knowledge of, you couldn't just make it up. If I was never involved in restaurants, or I never dated a chef, or I never met certain types of characters from those groups like AA or Al-Anon, I can't just make that up out of thin air. It would just be such a challenge, and it would be so unauthentic. And so I think in my head it was more about just picking and choosing from all the inspiration what would help this book and what would further the plot, and what I didn't really need. You know, I don't need to record everything. It's not a diary. But there's certain things that are very inspiring that I can either turn the volume up on or just make it more subtle. And yeah, so I think having people and having experience like that just helped incredibly with the authenticity of it.
So you're saying you didn't actually work actively to move away from these characters. You just let them inform your writing.
I just and I mean, when the book's over and done with, I think I went back and sort of scraped out anything that felt too much like a diary, you know, too much like, this is not a memoir, this is fiction. And so what are things, like I said, that I could kind of turn the volume up and make a little bit more tense and a little more emotional, and things that maybe I went through or saw, but I don't need to make it a key feature of the book.
Yeah, because it does feel like a memoir in the best possible way, because it feels so close.
That's what I want
to her, and you've done a really good job with that.
For people who know me, it's definitely hard for them to separate. They'll say like, oh, she, and I'm like, oh, you mean Allie, or what, you know, or you. They'll be like, you did. I'm like, oh no, Allie did that. For people who don't know me and just find the book in Georgia on the shelf at Barnes & Noble, it's fun because they have no idea, like they don't have no backstory.
So is Allie a lot like you?
I think that we have a lot of similar tendencies. Like, we really love all in, 100%. We really believe that we could bring out the best in other people, and we don't want to do everything for them, but we want to show them however we can how to help themselves, and just fiercely driven. Like, if she starts something, she's going to finish it. So.
And fairly fearless. I mean, if you're that fearless in real life, then, you know, go you.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that there's a lot of characteristics that we share, which makes her an easy character for me to get behind the wheel and drive the story.
So you were just telling me that you're finishing up your next book, and is that one also autobiographical?
Not at all.
Those two?
It's the complete opposite. I mean, from every single aspect, from where it takes place to the character, everything is different. And so it's fun to write because I can sort of pick, you know, which way, do I go left, do I go right? But it's much harder, it's a much longer process because I need to check myself and be like, does this feel authentic? Is this far-fetched? So it's a clunkier process, but I was just rereading the draft last night and was really into it. So it's different in every way possible, but it's still voice-driven, which is what is important for me. Exactly.
This book is completely voice, and I think having met you once when I,
did the panel,
and reading it, it was like you were in my head.
That's what I want.
And it's not just voicey in a I'm trying to be voicey kind of way. It's really clever in turn of phrase, and just really cleverly
I wanted to
written.
feel like I sat down with you and was like, I got a really long story for you, but take a seat and let me tell it. That's how I want.
And it's very millennial.
That's what I want. Yeah,
that's what voice is very millennial, and the references to popular culture are just spot on.
Right.
And I feel like my kids are talking to me often while reading it. I'm like, what does that mean?
Good. I love it.
I had a few mom moments.
True escapism. I want people to just cancel their, not realize that they've been reading the book for 6 hours straight and want to stay up and finish it. That's the kind of readability that I want.
And yeah, because I read it on some planes, and thank you for making my flights less boring. Also, I think Benji and how hot he is.
Yeah.
I mean, for my romance audience,
this
is a really. I mean, unfortunately, he's an addict.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
But
not
that
the guy
little
you want
thing.
to end up with. But driving up
he's
that.
really attractive. And I think some of that. I mean, he is physically attractive, but some of it is in the gentleness and the kindness and
when he can switch on those modes and his talent. When he can cook her whatever. And just put it on a plate in her little apartment. That this came from that. Like, I mean, it's intoxicating.
It
truly.
It is, and that again is a really good motivation for how she ends up. This question actually has to do with that. Nicole in Denver, hi Nicole, has asked on authorsvoice.net, what is the best meal in this book? Do you think?
There's a scene that got cut actually when we condensed the version. And it is where she, after all said and done and he leaves her high and dry, she remembers by memory what his recipe was for chicken. And in the book, his roasted chicken is like his thing. That's how he gets people to do anything. He's like, oh, I'll teach you the recipe to that. And she remembers kind of the steps. She can picture them. And so she Instacarts all the ingredients to do it, which is pretty simple: the chicken, the butter, the salt, the pepper. And it went through her doing that all herself with her hands and tying it up and putting it in and accomplishing that. And we cut it just strictly for word count, but it's such a vivid scene for me because it was like she took her one thing from him, and she's like, I can do this. And it was just, she just sat there at her counter pulling the pieces of it, and it was just like, it was perfect, melt in your mouth. And that was a meal as simple as it is. Like, I just remember how amazing and tender and everything like that it was. And for her to do that herself, it was such a cool scene. Unfortunately, it didn't make it to the final, but I remember it very vividly.
Because every time because there's scenes in here, people are eating chicken in this book a lot.
Yeah.
And there's a scene in which she's talking and he actually kind of picks up the skin and he's munching on it, and boy did I want.
Oh yeah, the chicken skin. Oh man.
Some crisp chicken skin.
Yes.
I really did want that. So now all of the food in this, and
there's a lot.
The food
it's
lingo.
Every bit is. I think Chicago Tribune said it was every bit as dishy as the food it describes, or something along that, and it's true. It's just like the food component is so strong, but so is that drama and
delicious chef, delicious food, and it was interesting that you said that she that she wanted that something that she took from him.
Yeah.
But I mean, she's taken something huge from him.
Yeah.
Right.
By the
it's
end,
like
sure.
all of it, like everything he wants.
Right.
She has.
Yeah.
So it's a job very well done.
Thank you.
I highly recommend the book for, I think, its prose, for its for its page turning quality, and it's and this quality where you will fall into these characters.
Yeah.
Completely.
Totally.
Like you're them. So that's again very well done.
Thank you.
You were. Before we leave, I do want to make sure we don't have any more questions, but also this next book that you tell us what's coming up next.
It's called Husband Material. It comes out in the fall of 2019, and it's much different. I haven't perfected the elevator speech yet, but essentially it's the story of a young widow. She's 30 years old in Los Angeles, and she becomes widowed at age 25, and the ashes of her husband come back. So the book is in the present, and how it comes back is, its own thing. Just remember, it takes place in Los Angeles. Things are a little different there. But it takes place in the present, and it's over a couple weeks period of time, and it's still voice driven, so it's not dark. It's pretty upbeat and witty and pop culture and all those fun things, but there's a little bit, what happens when it comes back, the twists and the turns and the secrets that sort of come out, it's still got that page turning quality. So totally different.
So it's her journey to...
Yeah, it's just kind of, reconciling with who she is now with that coming back, and how she thought she was healed, and things like that. I'm making it sound much more heavy than it is, and it's not. It's a good ride, and for that, again, having the platform that I have, it's not something that I could phone in. So I sat and did tons of research and interviews with these young widows who fit this very specific description, so that when we're talking about grief or loss or coping or anything, that all of that is very authentic. So it's not my guess at what it would be like. It's the result of all that sort of research.
So you have talked to
several, yeah.
And how does one go about finding widows? I mean, that's
social media. I tapped into one of the biggest Facebook groups called The Binders. It's like, I don't know, several thousands. And I just put out a plea, and I was like, if you fit this description and you're comfortable, please reach out to me. And it was either them directly, or it was people tagging people that they knew. And I had curated what I thought was a lot. I mean, given that they had to kind of check all these different boxes. And then I conducted interviews for a whole week with them, and then I had a second round of interviews with them. And it's great because there's little nuances of things of their story, essentially a lot of similarities. I could kind of predict what answers would be to certain questions by the end of my time with them, but just little nuances of things that, like in this book where I lived them, so I sort of know them. Mm-hmm. They were like just things that were so inspiring, that just a little scene, like a little nervous tick that they would do, or something from everybody I've worked into the draft. So it's a really cool way to sort of keep their stories and their memories of their people alive, yeah,
while still moving on.
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
Great. I cannot wait. And one of the scenes that I did want to mention before we left was the scene with Rita, where where she tries to warn her.
Yep.
Powerful, powerful stuff.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
so again, women helping women, and kind of that, and despite the fact that they're doing something that they're not supposed to do. And again, you of course wonder if you should trust her or not.
Exactly. What are her intentions? Everyone. What is everyone's intentions?
So you made me very suspicious.
Good.
And while I don't like it,
Right.
it was very enjoyable.
Hopefully the payoff.
While reading.
The payoff is there at the end, where you can kind of. Okay.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
And before we go,
Yeah.
and this is the last question.
Sure.
Recommendations for our viewers to read.
I just picked up a book called The Glitch. One of those books where the cover art sucks you in. And it's a bright pink cover, and it's about a girl who is working in tech, and she's so focused on her career, and then all of a sudden there's this woman coming in that has the same name as her and the same similar birthmark as her, and she's just completely does not know what way is up. So again, it's called The Glitch, and it's a debut novel. So want to support another debut novelist, and that's what's on my to read next as soon as I'm done with husband material. So
Fabulous.
Yeah.
And you said that comes out September next?
fall of
Fall of
2019.
Okay,
Yep.
great. Again, we were speaking with Emily Belden, and her book Hot Mess came out this year, and it is the story of an addict and a chef, and the woman who survives him.
Yes.
Kind of.
Perfect.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for being here. We're all out of time. Thank you again, Emily. Again, I must remind you, this book is $15.99. You will have signed copies at authorsvoice.net. So please do order the book. That's what keeps us bringing these interviews to you. So please do order the book. And thank you for tuning in. And before I let you go, we have coming up on Author's Voice, on A House Divided, back with author Manisha Sinha to talk about her new book, The Slave's Cause. That's at 3 p.m. on August the 2nd. And then, again, on A House Divided, we speak with author Paul Taylor about his latest book on the Civil War, The Most Complete Political Machine Ever Known. Look at the history of the Union Leagues. That's also August 2nd at 5 p.m. on a double feature for A House Divided. Then on Stranger Than Fiction, we return with Nina Barrett, author of the Leopold and Leo Files, here to take questions about the most complete collection of evidence assembled in a book. That's August 14th at 3 p.m. On Solved, to keep the crime flowing with Megan Abbott, author of Give Me Your Hand, at noon on August 16th. The next episode of Lit with Love is August 30th with Brenda Novak, and you can find out what time that is at on authorsvoice.net or follow me on Facebook. This is Sonali Dev thanking Emily Belden and signing off. Thank you so much for being here. We'll see you next month.